Hello everyone, my name is Thomas, and I'm going to be exploring the handpan. And this is for people who are just starting out with the handpan. Uh, and it's a little bit of music theory just to kind of help you move along so that it frees you up at the end once you understand a little bit of the theory behind it. It's pretty simple though. Um, every handpan is going to be in one scale. And we'll have most of the notes within that scale. So it's diatonic, which means you really can't make a bad note for the most part. That's why it sounds so good, and it's fairly easy to play. This is from Pantheon. It's a hollow in tuning in G, and it's typical G scale with a few little off notes to give it a little twist, which I prefer. It gives it kind of an Eastern tuning. So for this particular tuning is so every handpan is going to have the root note, which is the number 1, in this case G. And typically that'll be down in the bottom. So that'll be your core, that'll be your reference for every other note, really. And then in the higher G and the lower G. Now the bass, it depends on the hollow. It'll either be the root note, okay, the G, or it'll be the 5th, which the 1 and the 5 are like brothers, you know. You can't go wrong with those notes. Or it'll be the 4th. And in this case is the C, which is what I have. So that gives me 2 different chords, if you will, or 2 different scales that you can kind of play back and forth, which will typically be the 1, the 4, and the 5. Now, this may sound like Greek to you now, but it'll make sense in a little bit. So for example, the root note is G. If you walk up, G, A, B, C, D. The 1 and the 5, right? They're the brothers, the 1 and the 5. So you got the G and the D. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the first thing to do with your handpan is to find that 1 and 5. And that's going to make your scale, G, A, B, C, D. And that is basically your main scale. And then of course it goes from the 6th back to the root note, just the higher root note. So G, A, B, C, D, E, G. So if it skips a note, oftentimes it'll skip the 7th, the F. So you're a little limited that way, but that's okay. I mean, it depends upon what handpan that you get. So back to the root note, the 1 and the 5, the G and the D. Now, this handpan has also a C, which is the low note, the bass, and also the higher C. So it gives me another scale, which is the C minor. C, E flat, G. So with the C, the root, C, D, E, F, G. The G is the 5th. So you got the C and the G. C, G. So really, I think the important thing to do, whatever handpan you have, is to find the 2 chords that are related to each other. And they're either going to be most commonly the 1 and the 5. And then once you know those, then you can start playing more freely, because if you're in this key of G, and then the C, so you can go back and forth between the two chords. G chord, C chord, G chord, C chord. So that gives you a way to kind of go back and forth. If you're a musician and you play other instruments, then you'll know, what the chords are. So that's the first thing to do, is break down where your notes are for each chord, okay? And then you'll be able to find other chords in there too. You may not be able to find the 3 notes, but sometimes you can find other ones that work. For example, this has that A flat. So the A flat and the E flat is also the 1 and the 5. So those two will work well together. So it's finding the notes that work together. So I would start with the 1 and the 5, and then you can look around whatever handpan you have and find that 1 and the 5. Now a chord is basically 3, the 1, 3, and 5. And most handpans will have at least 2, sometimes 3. And then you're kind of off and running, because you can sort of get into going back and forth where you're playing 4 beats of the G and then 4 beats of the C. And that allows you to improvise within that, and you can create some dynamics that way. Now, my 3rd chord, being an A flat and the E flat, is different than your typical minor or major. It's a more of an Eastern scale, which I tend to like. It creates a little mystery or something. So that can be used intermittently with your other chords to create kind of a dynamic position. I hope that made sense with the chords, but I wanted to add that if you make yourself a diagram, just draw a circle and then put the ding in the center and then the circles, and try to approximate where, to sort of match your own handpan. And then write down all the notes and then break them down into, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. So as I mentioned earlier, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, back to the root. So it skips the 7. And oftentimes some handpans will skip a note, but that's okay. And then find your 1 and 5. So since it's the key of G, you can find the 1 and the 5. And then also the C. Now I also have a 3rd chord, which is the A flat and the E flat. And then that way I'll always know which notes go well together. Because then you can play those notes together, and then when you go to the next chord, you know what notes work well within that phrase. And then that gives you a way to kind of improvise a little more, because kind of like jazz in a way, right? They just have their chord structures. Everybody's in the chord, and then they can do whatever they want within that chord. I think that's very important. And then always know that your root, whatever scale that is, in my case, the G, that's going to be your main note that you'll always come back to on the beat. That's going to be the reference for everything else. So I hope that that's helpful for y'all. So let me know in the comments if you have any questions. Yeah, thanks again. Take care. Oh, and have fun. That's the important thing, And at first it will be a little bit of a challenge. Get yourself a metronome and just work. Find the groove. Because if you got the groove, that's all that really matters, right? I'm just going back and forth between the two chords, the 1 and a 5, the G and the D, and the C and the G. And yeah, take care.